Welcome to the Midnight Library. Like all libraries, we are here to share our knowledge, information, and stories. Unlike other libraries, if you hear screaming, it's okay to just ignore it. There are many foul creatures in this world that feed on the weak and defenseless. Monsters that stalk through the night, and things that can't be explained. Those are the kinds of stories that we collect here in the Midnight Library. I hope that you will enjoy them with me. And as you tuck yourself in at night and become the most vulnerable you can be, those stories don't come creeping back like some sort of predator lurking. From the time I was about 9 years old until I was 14 or 15, I would regularly experience these periods of semi-sleep where I would be awake enough to open my eyes and see the shadows of my room, but I couldn't move. The shadows would twist and turn into scary figures, horrible faces, watching me from the corner of my room or the end of my bed. These were my sleep paralysis demons. I hated their visits. It was terrifying. This was also the time my parents were getting divorced and I was changing homes. At first, my mom and dad were convinced that these were just normal childhood nightmares. Eventually, they got bad enough that my mom took me to the doctor. The doctor suggested that the increase in stress could have an effect on them, and after a while, the divorce was finalized, and things settled into a routine. I got used to my new home. Slowly, the sleep paralysis became less frequent, until it seemed to stop altogether. I had finished up high school and headed off to college. I was in the second half of my junior year when I found a little apartment off campus. It wasn't the best place in the world, but it was cheap, and I could afford it with my part-time job. I was going to classes during the day and working evenings and weekends. Trying to stay on top of my grades had me really stressed out. So I started to drink a hot cup of tea in the evening to help me relax. It was around this time that my sleep paralysis started to come back. I had been living in my new place for about 2 months when the first episode hit. The first night, my eyes popped open. The world was hazy and dark. My body felt heavy and immovable. The shadows were hard to read at first, but they became more solid, and sounds started to come through, the floorboards creaking as though someone was taking steps across it. My blood ran cold, but I still couldn't move. Making things all the more terrifying was the unmistakable sound of breathing, seeming to come somewhere close by. In my state, I had no way of knowing if it was real or a part of my dream, or if I was even hearing my own breathing. Eventually, I slipped back into sleep, and I woke up fine. A couple of weeks went by before it happened again. I came home from work. It had been a very hard day, and I was very tired. I made my cup of tea, and I settled into my bed to do some schoolwork. I hadn't had my computer booted up yet before I had fallen asleep. This time, when it started, my face was buried in my pillows. I couldn't move, but it felt like the room was swirling around me. I could hear the bumps and steps. It was just as terrifying as before. Unable to move, hardly able to breathe. Things happening around me I couldn't control or understand. My sleep paralysis started to become more frequent after that. The most frightening part of it was the shadowy figure that often appeared near my bed. It mostly stared at me, breathing heavily, its grim, shadowy face studying me, getting close to me, whispering to itself, and me being powerless to do anything. I assumed that the stress of the changes, school and work were getting to me. So I tried to get through it, but things were getting worse. The shadows were touching me, attacking me. I could feel its hands over my body. I needed to escape. So I took the day off of work to go see a doctor after class. I got home much earlier that day than I normally do. I locked myself in the bathroom and took a long, relaxing bath. I must have dozed off for a while. When I woke up, the water was much colder. As I climbed out of the tub, I heard a noise coming somewhere from my apartment. I froze and listened for a while. It was quiet. I grabbed a heavy statue off my sink and hurried to get dressed. I crept through each of the rooms of my apartment, flipping on lights, checking in closets and cabinets, checking under my bed. I found nothing. I told myself that it must have been in another apartment. I decided to work on some homework, but I couldn't concentrate. I was settled into my bed and hoped that a small break would help me. I pushed my work aside, laid back in my bed, and for a while it was working. My pillows and blankets were nice and cozy. That night I didn't feel exhausted, just relaxed. That was shattered when something slid across the floor. My eyes popped open. My heart was pounding. Was that in my apartment? Was it my imagination? I heard the sound again. It was not my imagination. It was in my apartment. It was in my closet. I slowly turned my gaze to the closet door. It was still cracked open for my search. I was afraid of what I might see, but I was also afraid to look away. A few more shuffles came from the closet. Deep in my mind, I hoped to see a rat come running out. I didn't. A round, pale face pressed against the crack. It had sharp eyes and a stone look. It was a man. A man was hiding in my closet. It was peering right at me. The face locked on my frozen body. I didn't know what to do. Pretend I was asleep? Pretend that I didn't see him? He watched me for what felt like forever. My heart beat so loud I was sure he could hear it. I couldn't control my breathing. Each breath was quick and heavy, and I was on the brink of hyperventilating. Finally, the face retreated into the shadows, and the door slowly clicked shut behind him. This was my best chance. I sprang from the bed and grabbed my phone from next to me. As I bolted for the door, I heard the closet door smash against the wall. Heavy footsteps close behind me. I ripped the front door open into the shared walkway. I ran for the neighbor's door and pounded on it, screaming, dialing for 911 as I did. The pale, stout man came out into the hallway. He stared at me. The neighbors finally opened the door, and the man disappeared in the other direction. I sat with my neighbor in her apartment, waiting for the police to come, fearing that he would come back. The police came. They talked to me outside while the others checked over my apartment. I remember looking at my trembling hands and feeling stupid for still being scared. One of the cops came out and asked me to walk through the house with him. Not much was different. The closet door stood open. There's a hole in the drywall from where the doorknob hit it. On the floor near the closet was a dumbbell that he had dropped when he come out. He was going to use that on me if I hadn't ran when I did. Inside the closet, there was a panel on the back wall that had been slid away. It led to a small crawl space. A few days later, they arrested a man that lived in the building. I looked at him. He had that same round, pale face that peered at me from the shadows. They also found sleeping pills in his apartment. He had been drugging my tea bags. Then he would hide in the crawl space and wait for them to take effect so that he could do what he wanted. I took time away from work and stayed with my mom for a while. I eventually got my own place again, but I was still uneasy being alone and wary of when I go to sleep. Wary of sleep paralysis demons.
Humans can be the worst kinds of monsters, and sometimes when you're alone, you are not alone. Happy readings, and don't forget your library cards.